Ava met Noah 3 weeks after she told herself she was done with men like him. She hadn't planned on it. That was how it always started, no expectations, no guard up, just a moment where loneliness and timing collided. It happened in a bookstore cafe on a Sunday afternoon. Rain streaked the windows, soft and steady, and Ava had gone there to feel less alone without having to talk to anyone. She was halfway through a novel she barely cared about when a voice interrupted her quiet. "Is that book any good, or are you pretending like I usually do?" She looked up, startled, and found him smiling down at her like he already knew her. Noah had dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and eyes that held confidence without apology. He wore a worn leather jacket, rain still clinging to the shoulders, like he'd rushed in just to be somewhere warm. Ava hesitated. "I think I'm reading it more for the atmosphere." He laughed, easy and unguarded, and pulled out the chair across from her without asking. "That's honest. I like that." She should have said no instead. She smiled. They talked for an hour. Then 2. Conversations with Noah felt electric, quick, clever, emotionally charged. He listened like every word mattered. He asked questions that made her feel interesting, layered, chosen. When he leaned in closer, lowering his voice like they were sharing secrets, Ava felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Desired. By the time they exchanged numbers, her heart was already sprinting ahead of her wisdom. Their relationship ignited fast, too fast, but Ava told herself that intensity wasn't always a red flag. Sometimes it was just chemistry, right? Sometimes love didn't creep in gently. Sometimes it crashed through the door. Noah texted constantly at first. "Good morning, beautiful. Can't stop thinking about you. I've never met anyone like you." Each message felt like a small rescue, pulling Ava out of herself. She reread them before bed, smiling into her pillow like a teenager, convincing herself this time was different. Dates turned into late nights. Late nights turned into staying over. Noah kissed her like she was oxygen, hungry, consuming, urgent. When he held her, it felt like being claimed, and Ava mistook that for safety. She ignored the way he dodged questions about his past. Ignored how his phone always seemed face down. Ignored the subtle shifts. The way affection turned conditional. The way his attention flickered when she needed reassurance. "You're too sensitive," he told her once, brushing off her concern with a smirk. "You read into everything." She laughed it off, even though something inside her sank. High moments came hard and fast. Noah surprised her with spontaneous drives at midnight, music blasting, windows down, the world blurred into freedom. He whispered promises into her hair, talked about the future like it was obvious she'd be in it. Low moments hit just as sharply. He disappeared for hours, sometimes days. When she asked where he'd been, he'd sigh like she was exhausting. "Can't I just live my life without checking in all the time?" Ava apologized, even when she didn't know what she'd done wrong. She began shrinking, softening her needs, editing her words, choosing silence over conflict. Loving Noah felt like walking on glass barefoot, but she told herself pain was part of passion. Wasn't it? One night, after waiting up for him past midnight, Ava checked his social media by accident, or maybe not by accident at all. Her chest tightened as she scrolled. There it was. A photo from earlier that evening. Noah at a bar, arms slung around a woman Ava didn't recognize. The caption was vague. The closeness was not. Her hands shook as she called him. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, who is she?" The question came out quieter than Ava meant it to. A pause, then laughter. "Seriously?" "I saw the picture. You're overreacting," he said immediately. "She's just a friend. It doesn't look like God, Ava." His tone hardened. "This is why relationships fail. Trust issues, trust issues." The words landed like blame wrapped in reason. Ava swallowed. "I just wanted honesty. And I want peace," he snapped. "But you're always questioning me." She apologized again. Later, lying awake beside him, Ava stared at the ceiling while Noah slept easily, his back turned toward her. She felt more alone than she had when she was single. Weeks passed like that, passion followed by distance, affection followed by coldness. Ava clung to the good moments like proof the bad ones weren't real. But her body started telling the truth before her heart could. She felt tired all the time, emotionally hollow. She laughed less, questioned herself more. One evening, after another argument that ended with Noah walking out without explanation, Ava sat on her bathroom floor with her back against the tub. Her makeup streaked her cheeks, her phone silent in her hand. She wasn't crying over him anymore. She was crying over herself. How did I end up here again? She whispered. She had given love everything she had, and somehow she felt emptier than before. The warmth she'd chased had turned into something draining, something that demanded and never filled. Ava wiped her face and stared at her reflection in the mirror across the room. She barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked tired, not just sleepy, worn, like her heart had been running a race it was never meant to win. That night, lying alone in bed, Ava placed a hand over her chest and felt the ache there. It wasn't heartbreak exactly. It was deeper than that, a hunger nothing human touch could satisfy. She closed her eyes, a quiet realization forming like a bruise she could no longer ignore. This love wasn't saving her, it was slowly breaking her, and somewhere beneath the exhaustion and longing, a single, unsettling truth surfaced. Even when someone wanted her, something was still missing. The end didn't come with a scream, it came with a text. Ava was standing in line at the grocery store, her cart half filled with things she didn't need, when her phone vibrated in her hand. She glanced down, expecting nothing, and somehow bracing for everything. "Noah, I can't do this anymore. You're too much. I need space. Please don't contact me." That was it. No explanation. No conversation. No goodbye. Just a sentence that erased months of her life like they'd been a misunderstanding. The cashier asked if she wanted paper or plastic. Ava stared at her, unblinking, as if the question had come from underwater. "Paper," she said finally, her voice sounding far away. She walked out of the store in a fog, groceries digging into her fingers, the sky heavy and grey like it knew something had broken. When she reached her car, she set the bags down carefully, too carefully, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. Her phone buzzed again. For a brief, stupid moment, hope flared. Then the screen went dark. Blocked. Ava laughed once, sharp and hollow. "Of course," she whispered. The drive home passed in fragments, red lights, blurred buildings, her hands gripping the steering wheel like it might slip away from her too. By the time she reached her apartment, her chest felt tight, like the air had turned against her. Inside, the silence was unbearable. The beige couch, the folded blanket, the faint scent of vanilla from a candle she never lit anymore. Everything looked exactly the same, and somehow that made it worse. Ava dropped her keys on the counter and slid down the wall until she was sitting on the kitchen floor. The cool tile pressed against her legs as she pulled her knees to her chest. Too much. That was the word he'd used. Too emotional. Too needy. Too intense. Too much to love. Ava pressed her forehead against her knees. Why am I always too much for the people I give everything to? Her thoughts spiraled fast and cruel. You should have known better. You ignored the signs. You let him treat you like an option. You did this to yourself. Regret flooded her. Every time she stayed quiet instead of speaking up, every apology she didn't owe, every night she waited for a man who couldn't commit to her. She remembered the woman in the bar photo. The way Noah had turned it around on her. The way she believed him because believing felt easier than being alone. Shame burned hot and deep. How many times are you going to repeat this? She thought bitterly. How many times will you beg to be chosen? Ava dragged herself to the bathroom and caught her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were red, her face pale, her expression empty. She didn't look heartbroken. She looked defeated. "Get it together," she whispered, gripping the sink. "You're an adult. You're supposed to be stronger than this." But her reflection didn't argue. It just stared back like it didn't recognize her either. The days that followed blurred into each other. Ava went to work and answered emails with mechanical efficiency. She smiled when required. She nodded at conversations she didn't hear. At night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment she wished she could rewrite. She stopped answering texts. Stopped returning calls. Selena left voicemails full of concern. Ava let them go unanswered, unable to explain something she didn't understand herself. Isolation wrapped around her slowly, like a blanket that suffocated instead of warmed. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ava found herself sitting on the edge of her bed in the dark. Her phone lay beside her, screen black, useless. She thought about all the love she'd given. All the hope she'd poured into men who treated it like something disposable. "I don't know how to do this anymore," she murmured to the empty room. Her chest tightened as tears finally came, hot and relentless. She pressed her hands over her mouth, trying to stay quiet, but the sob that escaped her sounded raw and broken. She slid off the bed and onto the floor, her back against the mattress, the carpet rough against her palms. "I tried," she whispered through tears. I really tried. Images flashed through her mind, her younger self dreaming of love that felt safe, her grandmother's gentle voice talking about faith, the way she'd once believed life had meaning beyond survival. When had she stopped believing that? Ava hugged herself, rocking slightly as the weight of it all crashed down. She felt small. Unworthy. Alone. Like she'd reached the end of herself and found nothing left. Her voice cracked as it spilled out into the darkness, not directed at anyone in particular, just thrown into the void like a last breath. I can't do this by myself anymore. The words echoed, fragile and honest. Her shoulders shook as she pressed her forehead to the floor. Please, she whispered. Someone, help me. It wasn't a prayer. Not yet. But it was a cry from the deepest part of her, a place that knew she was drowning and couldn't save herself. And for the first time, Ava didn't try to be strong. She just cried. Ava didn't know how long she slept on the floor that night. When she woke, her body ached the way it did after too much crying, heavy, sore, hollowed out. Morning light slipped through the gap in the curtains, pale and gentle, like it was unsure whether it was welcome. She sat up slowly, her head resting against the edge of the bed, and listened. The apartment was still. But it felt different. Not empty, just quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't press down on her chest. Ava pushed herself to her feet and padded into the kitchen. She poured a glass of water, her hand steadier than she expected, and leaned against the counter as sunlight spread across the floor. Dust floated through the air like tiny sparks. She didn't feel better, but she didn't feel as broken, and that confused her. Her eyes drifted toward the living room, to the bookshelf she usually ignored. The old Bible her grandmother had given her sat exactly where it always had, its spine faded, pages slightly warped with age. Ava frowned. She hadn't thought about it in years. She told herself she was just curious. Just killing time before another long day of pretending. She picked it up and turned it over in her hands. The cover was softer than she remembered, worn smooth by someone else's touch long before it became hers. When she opened it, a folded piece of paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor. A note. Ava knelt and picked it up, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it. For the days when you feel unloved, remember, you never walk alone. Grandma Ava's breath caught. Her grandmother had written that years ago, back when Ava still believed life would unfold gently if she tried hard enough. She swallowed, her chest tightening again, but this time, the ache felt different. Softer, like grief mixed with comfort. She sat down on the couch and opened the Bible at random. The pages rustled quietly, thin and delicate. Her eyes landed on a verse she didn't remember choosing. She read it slowly, once. Then again, something in her chest loosened. It wasn't the words themselves. Not exactly. It was the way they felt. Like they weren't accusing her. Like they weren't asking her to prove anything. Like they were simply there. Ava leaned back against the couch and closed her eyes. I don't even know how to do this, she whispered into the room. If anyone's listening. The words felt awkward, unfinished. She waited. Nothing dramatic happened. No voice filled the air. No sudden revelation split the ceiling open. Instead, something warm settled over her, quiet, steady, patient. Ava's breathing slowed. Her thoughts, usually so loud and sharp, softened at the edges. For the first time in weeks, her mind wasn't replaying conversations or rewriting endings. It was still. And in that stillness, she felt it. Not pressure. Not judgment. Presence. It felt like being noticed without being inspected. Like someone sitting beside her without needing her to explain herself. Tears welled in her eyes again, but these were different too, gentler, relieved. I'm tired, she whispered. I don't know how to fix myself. The warmth didn't leave. If anything, it grew. Ava imagined a light, not blinding, not overwhelming, but steady, like morning sun through sheer curtains. It wrapped around the broken parts of her she'd been trying to hide, and instead of recoiling, it stayed. Her chest tightened as a realization surfaced, quiet but unmistakable. You don't have to earn this. The thought didn't feel like her own. It felt given. She pressed her hand over her heart as a sob escaped her, not of pain this time, but of release. I've been so afraid, she admitted. Afraid I'm too much. Afraid I'm not enough. And in that sacred quiet, something answered, not with words, but with knowing. You're already known. Ava's shoulders shook as the truth of it washed over her. All this time, she had been bending herself into pieces, offering love like a transaction, believing she had to be chosen to be worthy. And here, now, she felt chosen without condition. She didn't feel fixed. She felt held. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time seemed irrelevant in the softness of that moment. Eventually, Ava opened her eyes. The room looked the same. The couch, the window, the muted hum of the city outside. But she wasn't the same. She felt lighter, not because everything was solved, but because she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Ava rested her head back and let out a slow breath, a small smile touching her lips through lingering tears. For the first time, she whispered, almost in wonder, "I don't feel invisible." And somewhere deep within her, where loneliness had lived for so long, something new took root. Not romance, not longing. Love, the kind that stayed. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, in small moments Ava almost missed. Mornings began to feel different. Not easier, just softer. The panic that used to greet her as soon as she opened her eyes no longer rushed in uninvited. Some days it still hovered at the edges, but it didn't own her anymore. Ava started waking up a few minutes earlier, sitting at the edge of her bed with the curtains open, letting sunlight spill across the floor. She didn't rush to check her phone. She didn't brace herself for bad news. She breathed. On the third morning like that, she reached for the old Bible again. Not because she felt obligated, because she wanted to. She read slowly, not trying to understand everything, just letting the words sit with her. When she didn't understand something, she didn't panic or feel unworthy. She simply paused. "It's okay not to know yet," she whispered to herself. That was new. The more time Ava spent in that quiet presence, the more she began to notice changes, not around her, but within her. The sharp edges of her memories softened, thoughts of Noah still surfaced, but they no longer carried the same sting. Where there had once been anger and longing tangled together, there was now clarity. She saw the relationship for what it had been. A hunger pretending to be love. Ava sat on a park bench one afternoon, watching sunlight dance through the leaves above her. Children laughed somewhere nearby. A breeze brushed against her skin, gentle and warm. She thought about all the versions of herself she had been. The girl who begged to be chosen. The woman who apologized for wanting honesty. The heart that believed love had to hurt to be real. "I forgive you," she whispered, to herself. The words felt awkward at first, like a language she was still learning. But they settled deep, loosening something tight and painful inside her. She closed her eyes. "I forgive them too," she added, voice steady. Not because they deserved it, but because she did. In the quiet that followed, Ava felt that familiar warmth again, steady, unchanging. It didn't demand. It didn't withdraw. It didn't make her question her worth. Christ's love was nothing like the love she'd chased. It didn't arrive with fireworks and urgency. It didn't leave her anxious or unsure. It didn't punish her for having needs. It stayed. Where toxic love had asked, "What can you give me?" This love whispered, "Come as you are." Ava pressed her palm to her chest and smiled softly. For so long, she had confused intensity with intimacy. She had mistaken being wanted for being loved. Now she understood the difference. One evening, Ava stood in her bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror. Not searching for flaws. Not measuring her worth. Just looking. "I don't hate you anymore," she said gently. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. She looked whole. Not perfect. Not finished. But no longer fractured. Days turned into weeks. Ava began reaching out again, calling Selena back, meeting her for coffee, laughing without forcing it. She set boundaries she once would have been afraid to name. She said no without guilt. And when loneliness crept in, as it sometimes did, she didn't run from it. She brought it into the quiet and let it rest there. One night, curled up on the couch with a blanket and a mug of tea, Ava realized something that made her laugh softly. She was content. Not because someone loved her, but because she was loved. She leaned her head back, eyes closing, and whispered a simple thank you, not out of obligation, but gratitude. Her life wasn't a romance novel anymore. It was a restoration story. And for the first time, Ava felt complete. Standing alone, heart steady, held by a love that would never ask her to earn it. Ava didn't fall into love this time. She stepped into it. Slowly, with open eyes, with a heart no longer starving. It happened months later, in a way so ordinary she almost missed it. She met Daniel at a volunteer event on a Saturday morning, the kind of morning that smelled like fresh coffee and new beginnings. They were packing food boxes for families in the community, standing side by side at a long folding table. Daniel smiled at her once, simple and kind, and then went back to his work. He didn't try to impress her. That alone felt different. They talked between tasks, about favorite books, early mornings, the quiet joy of helping without being seen. When Ava mentioned how volunteering had become important to her, Daniel nodded like he understood something deeper than her words. "It keeps me grounded," he said. "Reminds me what actually matters." Ava felt something warm settle in her chest, not excitement, not rush, but recognition. They didn't exchange numbers that day. They waved goodbye and went their separate ways, and Ava didn't feel anxious about it. She didn't replay the conversation or wonder what she should have said differently. She felt at peace. They met again the following week. Then again the week after that. Conversations unfolded naturally, unforced. Daniel listened the way people do when they aren't waiting for their turn to speak. When Ava spoke about her past, she didn't feel the need to soften it or justify herself. She told the truth, and Daniel received it without judgment. "I'm not trying to be someone I'm not anymore," she said quietly one evening as they walked through a park, the sky painted soft shades of gold and blue. Daniel nodded. "I wouldn't want you to be." There was no rush to define anything. No pressure. No late-night emotional roller coasters, just presence. And respect. When they did begin to acknowledge what was forming between them, it felt intentional. Rooted. Safe. Ava prayed about it, not with fear, but with trust. "If this is from you," she whispered one night, "let it grow. And if it's not, give me peace to walk away." Peace stayed. Daniel never competed with the quiet moments she cherished. He never made her feel guilty for her faith, or threatened by it. When she spoke about Jesus, he didn't dismiss it or mock it. He honored it. One evening, sitting across from each other at a small cafe, Ava realized something profound. She wasn't afraid of losing him. That was new. Love no longer felt like something she had to cling to. It felt like something she could hold with open hands. She saw now how different this love was. It didn't consume her identity. It didn't demand she abandon herself. It didn't replace the foundation she'd found. It grew from it. Christ remained at the center, not as a rule, not as a checklist, but as the source of the peace they shared. Their conversations were honest. Their boundaries clear. Their affection gentle and mutual. Ava felt safe to be fully herself, faith, flaws, questions, and all. One evening, as they sat watching the sun disappear beyond the horizon, Ava felt gratitude rise in her chest. Not just for Daniel, but for the journey that had brought her here. For the heartbreak that had led her to healing. For the loneliness that had led her to love that stayed. For the quiet presence that had taught her who she was. She closed her eyes and breathed it in. "This feels good," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "It does." And it did. Not because love had finally saved her, but because she had already been saved, and now, love was simply a gift. Ava looked up at the darkening sky, her heart full and steady. "Thank you," she thought, "for teaching me how to love without losing myself."